So welcome to the DVD commentary. My name's Owen Gower, I'm the director of the film.
My name's Sinead Cohen, I'm the producer of the film.
And I'm Mark Lacey, the other producer of the film. It's the very beginning. This is Frickley, used to be Frickley Colliery in South Elmsall in Yorkshire. Yeah. Me and Sinead first went there. We saw it when we were looking at some other places. Lovely Ian showed us around, I think.
Yeah, we went across the whole of South Yorkshire and back again, looking for a really nice location, and it was just really stunning and it stood out. And yeah, the legendary Ian Oxley, the resident of Frickley, who introduced us to this space.
And because obviously Paul, as you see here, this is his old colliery, and this is actually the first time he's seen it since it had been knocked down. He walked in and he started filming him, didn't we?
Well, I think this was, a place, Frickley Colliery was a place that Mike Simmons, our executive producer, had also visited a lot of the times during the strike as a journalist, and that's really how he got to know Paul that you see here, and obviously then how he introduced us and really to the other miners in the film.
Dropped like a bullet, and at that point there was silence.
Wasn't this the most scorching day that Yorkshire has ever seen?
It felt like Spain, didn't we? You even ate our lunch outside, I think. Remember?
Because we turned up thinking, oh God, it might rain, there might be real problems because we're filming outside all day. And in the end, it was a massive problem. It was so hot.
Yeah. I actually had to apply a tiny bit of makeup to Paul to keep.
I don't think you'd want anyone knowing that.
I think he looked dashing. And my secondary job was just to hold an umbrella over his face so the sun wouldn't burn him while we were filming. He also told us a lot about the siege of the villages. He actually took us around the whole of Frickley, sort of going.
Where the police occupied the village?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is an amazing sequence. Really shame that it couldn't be in the film actually, but there's a photo of it in the film later.
Yeah, there is.
Look at
And this is Penalta Colliery, that's right, isn't it?
It's at South Wales.
Yeah, South Wales, in the valleys. Yeah,
which is opposite where Ron Stote, who's the Welsh interviewed miner, and he's literally lived at his wife's house opposite that colliery from the moment that it closed, where it was a sort of really vibrant place of work, to what it is now.
Oh, that's a shocking shot as well. It's really powerful intercut between with that old lady being pushed over. I think it really kind of puts a stark contrast between what's going to happen in the film.
And I love that old colliery, the way it looks. It's just, it was mental. Remember when we went
there? Well, it's amazing and terrible at the same time.
Yeah.
It's an incredible looking place, but it's to have seen something become a sort of a shell of what was a really busy place. I think they're just making some flats next to it.
Yeah, there was weird. That's that weird because you don't see. Obviously, we've got we just shown it broken down, but right next to there's quite nice sort of
nice
looking flats.
Yeah.
It's quite funny how it's all changed. It's how the industrial landscape changed, I suppose. But it was really. I remember we didn't stumble upon it. Ron told us. We went there and we were like, oh, this is amazing.
There's our favourite person. Like to get her in nice and early.
Yeah, we looked at a lot of archives.
I've seen every Conservative Party conference speech, I think, since
1979. Oh yeah, you did have to watch it.
Do you remember? This is the infamous, the opening that we made initially with the Billie Holiday track, and then just because Jack came in and put it over the top, and it sounded really nice.
And stayed.
And then stayed.
I think this sequence in general we cut this very early on, and it almost didn't change. Apart from this shot, which was a Silverwood colliery training trading DVD that we found. But yeah, it was.
Is Price of Coal some of this stuff?
Yeah, it is. Ken Loach that's a drama that Ken Loach made to the BBC.
And that's that. What's the hole that Norman's talking about?
The hellhole.
The hellhole. We had to send one to find a hellhole, a shot of a hellhole.
Yeah, and a Norman strike lookalike.
Yeah.
Lovely Norman, our favourite. He's just such a great character. His name's amazing, let alone everything else that he does.
And also that is a Victorian sewing factory, wasn't it? A mill in Birmingham.
Yeah, watches as well, I think, later on as well. And it was sort of quite well preserved and had beautiful old machinery, and we just loved the look of it all.
Do you remember we had a problem? They were building a BBC set of a police station upstairs during the entire interview. Which
well, to be fair, I was in the pub on the laptop while we were shooting, but as usual, doing work, obviously.
This is the 1970s stuff, which was actually amazing because it was something we hadn't really seen before. You see a lot of a lot of footage of the modern day miners' strike. You don't really get to see the stuff from the 70s so much.
It's worth saying actually that the 70s, a lot of the 70s archive footage looks much better than the stuff in the 80s, because in the 80s they switched to video away from film, and so it's basically the worst period in history to have made an archive-heavy film about, because it's literally before the 90s and
and after that.
And after the 70s.
And there's the infamous Joe and his mortgage story. How many times did we do this one?
This one we had to re-interview because we'd already shot an early tape with him, and he did the story once again. Simple, same story, same lines, and he had his hair cut twice during our re-interviews, which meant I think he'd said that story something like 40 times.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Everything else is very natural. That one story is not so natural.
And it was really important for the film. It's my favourite bit, one of my favourite bits of archive, but I've seen it so many times, I'm not sure.
I sing this song in the shower. Be a man. It's one of my favourite things.
Also,
in the
a late
film.
edition. We actually almost considered not putting it in because we thought it would be so jarring, because it's so ridiculous that people might not believe it was real.
Everyone loves it. It's so
I actually
great.
didn't think it was real.
Well, yeah, but it almost looks like it could be edited by us.
But unfortunately,
This is another
grand entrance.
This is another amazing bit, because you just the contrast again is so hilarious. The contrast between what she's saying and the booing in the background. It's like
the news reporters going, a huge crowd and a huge cheer the whole time. We actually again had to make it not seem too unbelievable. There's just so many boos all the time. We have to be careful to not to be over enhancing the sound.
Yeah.
And there's Steve
in the wonderful Audley and District Working Men's Club near Crewe.
Who were really, really nice, actually.
Yeah, they were brilliant.
Well, this was like one of the many places that just really, not only did they give us the location for free, and she made a whole tray of sandwiches for us, cups of tea the whole time. There's just really...
She was lovely.
Yeah.
No, that was great, and Steve's such a great character, and having him in that. Because he's a veteran of the 70 strikes, of course, so...
Yeah, the only one, actually, wasn't it?
Yeah. So, no, brilliant. Yeah, I did love that Audrey, just in the middle of Crewe, in an old mine as well. There don't exist that many of them anymore, so it was nice to be able to shoot it.
I think in general, with all these interviews, that what we did was put them in signs of Britain's industrial past, either old factories, collieries themselves, or obviously working men's clubs. This montage was another one where I think basically every montage in the film, what we did was, instead of, we weren't just sort of making up as we went, they were basically based on everything that had been said in the interviews and what the miners were talking about the period with Thatcher, that we just wanted to show visually or, and get music from the time, which is another band from Foreign Legion, I think this band is.
Is this the bit where you had that fantastic picture of her? Or is that cut?
No, you're talking about later, I think.
Yeah, a bit later on that one.
Oh, this is the Stockport Messenger dispute, which is basically the first time that Thatcher tested out police tactics on industrial action ahead of the miners' strike, but as part of the Ridley Plan, which obviously the film talks about later. So this is the infamous Union Power speech that, where was it? It was dug up from Hansard.
Yeah.
That Margaret Thatcher made.
Yeah. Basically, at the time that she said it as well, she didn't actually have the majority of the Tory party behind her on the strategy of confronting the unions directly. And by making that speech, it sort of forced everyone to come in behind her. And that's, in some ways, I suppose, what makes her a great, a leader for her side.
I know that you and our fantastic edit producer, Amelia Lavington and Edison Paul, were really keen to get that historical context in.
Yeah, definitely. It was about giving us enough context and background to the strike as possible, but really not spending too long before we got into the strike, because we wanted to, focus on the human stories.
That's such an old-looking meeting as well. That meeting just from the 70s, isn't it?
It's very difficult to find dynamic footage of union conferences.
What, you mean people voting? Let's take their hands up. I don't know, we thought we did pretty well, considering.
But yeah, this is incredible footage as well, actually. It's the same 70s picklines, and this is 72 and 74. Well, this Battle of Salt the Gates in 72. That again, it was another thing that we'd have loved to put more in. There's some incredible footage actually for confrontation, but I think because there's so much about the strike later, we've sort of really wanted to sort of just give enough for context. Really,
yeah, it was really important for us to get this stuff in though, to give context to why, what led up to 84, because I think it's something that not everybody knows about, and we were really key for us, I think, to get it across, and you were obviously you were keen to get it as.
Well, this is it. I mean, this stuff about the 70s. There's so much of it that could make up half a film in itself, and I think
This. I mean, I quite like the way that we've done this bit as well. And we had to do a shout out for a TV that was this old, so it would work for this shot. Because and we had to do a little trip to Walthamstow, didn't you have to go?
Tottenham, yeah. And I accidentally left it in our office for about 2 months, but I dropped it off the other day. Very happy to have it back.
Why would you have a TV that old? I mean, really.
And these newspapers as well are all unearthed, and there's a guy who's got basically newspaper archives going back decades, that we have to dig out. We should probably mention actually Gerard, our archive producer, who uncovered all of this stuff, is travelling up and down the country.
This is my favourite bit from the 70s though, because I had to watch it several times before I understood what the song was. We Sunk His Yacht, which is like a...
And this is Joe back in... We didn't really... The old Ledston Lock Colliery.
Yeah, of course, another colliery that was shut down. It's a great listed building now, so it'll stay open.
And brilliant. Kevin was great, who runs the place, who let us go there. He was brilliant, just like so helpful. We went back about 4 times.
It happened over and over again, didn't it? And this is another of the many Tory party conferences I watched over the making of the film.
I mean, it was amazing when we first looked into the Thatcher archive as well, because you see it all connects together. All the other footage that you get to watch of her on Northern Ireland, really shocking stuff of her during the Falklands War, and you think at the same time she was totally restructuring Britain, and it just is really kind of chilling, some of the stuff, the way she presents us.
And Ridley's an interesting character that obviously doesn't... He gets the Ridley Plan is obviously mentioned in the film, but I was reading his autobiography during the making of this film, and
Isn't it called The Enemy Within?
No, that's McGregor. Every book about the miners' strike is called The Enemy Within. But Ridley, he's really it's supposed to be a secret plan and everything, but essentially can't contain his pride at the fact that the Ridley Plan was carried out, and says, quite openly that he saw everything after 1945 with, the NHS and public services as an absolute travesty that had to be rolled back, and had set about this project, and it's stated very, very openly, And
this archive that we found where the police are being trained up, I mean, you couldn't find any more evidence of what they were planning to do, really.
It's all a matter of public record. It's really amazing that these things, it's not like this wasn't known. I mean, it was leaked to The Economist in 1978 and was made headlines, and yet it sort of seems to have been buried as a piece of the history, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, didn't even really know about it until we started doing the film, and suddenly you're like, how does anyone not? This is like a public record that people have looked at, and it lays out what's going to happen.
Well, in fact, didn't we first find it on the Thatcher Heritage Foundation, displayed with pride, really, on the website. It's
a fascinating kind of document that people... I think it's really great that we've got it into the film, because you don't see it enough, and things about the miners' strike, it's not talked about enough.
Well, you don't realise it's written so clearly. You hear about the Ridley Plan, and they had this plan, but you don't realise it's actually laid out in black and white. We're going to take on other workers.
Well, this is it. I read it cover to cover, and I spent ages going, I'm trying to read between the lines. Maybe I've got it wrong about all this interpretation, and you get to the end, it says confidential annex, and there it is, laid out as a blueprint.
Yeah, no, it's something else. I love this bit of archive as well, but I love and hate it because it was one that we had to find for ages, and it disappeared for a bit, and when we came just that one bit took me ages. We had a bit of an issue getting the master of it, so we had a bit of a love-hate relationship.
We had a lot of need for shots of miners marching. I mean, you start to use every one you have.
Exactly.
Well, again, I mean, just talking about the archive. Look at the quality. Actually, I mean, obviously it's slightly degraded, but it's crisper, and the colours are much better when it's down to film compared to that, which is obviously 80s news footage. I never thought I'd know as much about archive as I do. We made this film. It's like get me the right stock.
Well, how much? What have we got? 3,500, 4,000 bits of archive log that we looked at for the film,
and 2,000 photographs. I think we went through. Yeah,
it's just unreal how much archive we had to go.
And 75 hours of interview, I think.
Tories have never forgotten.
Scargo's talking about the 70s here, and there's one thing that I really wanted to get in the film, actually, which Joe talked to me about. Joe, who's the miner being interviewed earlier about the 70s, and he said basically that, why did we lose when in the 80s, when we had Arthur Scargill, who was potentially the most militant trade union leader of a generation, in the 80s, why did we win in the 70s, where we had Joe Gormley, who was a right-wing union leader and was exposed as a special branch informants, was actually informing the government on the negotiations as they happened. And he said the difference was the traditions of solidarity and, the unions fighting together, basically, which by the time that Thatcher took on the miners had sort of been eroded quite a lot, and so it's a big part, I think, for the film really about showing it is ordinary people at the centre that make the difference, and it's why we don't deal with Scargill that much in the film. We're not talking about the leaders really, we're talking about the people on the ground.
But also, I don't think we shy away from the fact that the miners on the ground, the ones that we spoke to at least, they did see Scargill as their leader. They elected him to take on on Thatcher, to feel protected against this new ideology.
They would certainly defend him, but they would also say it's the strike is about so much more than leaders.
So our first look at Jim, our lovely Scottish miner. He's again in Leadson Lock, but inside, not outside. But it was almost colder inside than it was outside.
And a very difficult location. It was echoey. It was. I think we had a generator failed, so we ended up with this. Yeah.
He's Scottish though. He can take the cold. He can take it. And what was amazing about Jim is though he could really bring sort of the voice of reason, really explain very complex ideas about the plan for coal and everything very simply, and I think that he plays a crucial role in the film in the way that he does
it's
that.
interesting, like he's talking about McGregor and things here, and a number of the miners, I think Jim, it's him, and then the other miners, Joe and Norman Strike as well, all became teachers after the strike because they'd learned to speak and learn to make arguments and sort of educated themselves, and it comes across in a way. I think they're very, very good at explaining simple arguments or complex arguments simply.
It's quite funny. I think if there was a comedy character, it would be Ian McGregor in the film, don't you think? He's kind of like the fall guy. He literally does fall over at one point in the film.
he does. To a big cheer.
Yeah. It's funny face.
Well, again, there's a lot of other documentaries in the past have focused quite heavily on Ian McGregor, because the one thing we didn't get is when he turned up to negotiations wearing a paper bag on his head to try and avoid the press, and after that got removed as the spokesperson for the coal board, which caused us problems in the edit. He suddenly disappeared.
Yeah, so he doesn't appear in anything, does he? And he's off. Yeah, they didn't love him, the miners.
He plays a dual role. We sort of make light of him slightly. We don't in the film, but you can make light of him slightly. But he was a real union buster. I mean, he decimated unions in America. He decimated steel union in the UK. And so he's sort of comedy, but also quite insidious.
Well, it was interpreted very, very clearly that when he became leader of the coal board, that was it, that a confrontation was essentially inevitable, that there was no reason to have brought him to the coal board other than he had a history of taking on unions.
I love this bit of art.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Do you know what's quite sad actually is both of those characters, because obviously if you watch all the archive over the course of a year, often the same people turn up that are being spoken to, and actually both of those characters appear in documentaries towards the end of the year when they're much more haggard and they're much more, they show the signs of what it's like to have been on strike for a year. So it's quite hard sometimes when you see, you really follow the transition, not just of our characters, but actually people through the archive, of what happened.
Where's that from, that bit? Is that from...
that was from a brilliant documentary, actually, Channel 4, Colin Not Dole.
Oh, yeah.
Because obviously Channel 4 had film co-ops, like Banner Films, I think Steel Films, were making a lot of really, really quite challenging films that they were putting on, on Channel 4 about the strike, during the strike, which is quite
This is another
interesting.
Bit from it as well.
No, this is BBC. This is from the day that Courtney was closed, that bit of footage. And this was from one of the many... miners' own tapes, that was, because there's obviously the miners' campaign tapes, which are owned by the BFI, that were made by miners for miners, but also there were whole worlds of videos, really good videos made by miners and miners' wives.
But you also, that's something else that we discovered. Like you sort of think about nowadays that you do film, you see a lot of people filming on demonstrations and stuff, but you don't realise that even in the 80s, people were making their own media, going out and interviewing each other and.
Well, it was a flourishing of all those sorts of things, both film and music, as well, that people were very much taking a sort of DIY approach, and that was what the great thing about Channel 4 at the time actually was that it was really pushing for those things to be on television. It was quite, I think, post-strike, that's one of the things is we think of it as depoliticised times, but actually the 80s was a very, very political time, in general.
And getting hold of that archive, it was great finding bits that we just people.
Here we go. Here he is. Whee!
I love his jacket.
I'm sure it's NTV documentary.
Yeah, doesn't someone have one of them in our reconstructions?
They did, except sadly they bought it off eBay. They didn't actually own it as an original.
And this is Cornwall, the key battleground really that started the whole strike.
I think through all this, a frustration for me in some ways, I suppose, was that I really wanted. There's so much context and information I think you could give about the whole period that built up to the strike. But I think we felt at the time that really the best thing to do is get to the strike for people to see what happened and sort of allow all those things to come out really over the course of the film, because you can't do everything.
This is quite a hairy bit as well. This is in Scotland.
In Scotland, yeah. In Dalkeith, I think it is.
Which shows really there was a really strong debate within amongst the miners themselves, people before they went on strike, kind of the idea that it just happened and people were led into something blind.
Well, like we were talking about Scargill before, isn't it? It's not that it's a pro or anti-Scargill, it's more that the idea that it was blind followers that were sort of led into the strike by Scargill. I think it's clear from obviously our miners, you can see that they know what they're talking about, but all through the archive, it's about ordinary people, very, very clued up, having very sharp arguments on both sides, actually, for and against the strike. Our first bit of reconstruction.
Yeah, drama reconstruction, the lovely...
there we go.
There it is, the NCV.
That lovely club in Stroud Green. Well,
yeah, who knew that there was an incredible gentleman's club, working men's club, right in the centre of North London. Yeah, that was sort of perfect location for us.
Yeah, it was great, and I loved it. Our map.
Yeah, well, we had a really good. It was Ben, the animator, did an absolutely fantastic job with this, because it was about, again, trying to not make, obviously graphics are a new thing, but the fact he took elements, of old newspapers and old things that make it all part of, of what the original archive is.
Well, it's important for us as well to have those different visual things in the film to make, to show, to help.
And the old and new side by side, really.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's great.
And this is such a crucial build-up in the film. I think the first real turning point.
And a great piece of music, actually, is 52 Commercial Road.
Yeah.
Composed for it, which was really good.
No, it's great. And there we are, day one of the strike.
Day one, that's it. And then it begins. And I'll tell you why that says March 1984 and doesn't say a date, is because there were so many different starts to the strike. It's really, because it's when Cortland Wood was closed, it's when lots of other mines came out, and because lots of mines came out individually, how can you pick the one specific day that it starts? So it became March.
Literally, out of all the miners we spoke to, everyone was like, my pip came out first.
Yeah.
I was the first one.
Steve was out 3 weeks before Cortland Wood even closed.
just out for a picnic.
Yeah, just out.
And all about picketing. And so as our next recon, this was a lot of fun to film.
Oh God, this was a nightmare, wasn't it?
I mean,
we won't mention the sign.
We won't mention. We had a very, very dedicated researcher, Alex, who went to a lot of trouble to make that sign and then make it again.
Yeah, because it said Barnsley branch, it said Barnsley area, which most people might not be bothered about, but miners certainly would be bothered about. It may have been digitally altered.
And then this is it's actually a very good friend of ours who's playing Joe in this reconstruction.
Yeah.
He's a thrill seeker, we'll put it that way.
Yeah.
This was all done safely, I'd like to point out, to the highest levels of health and safety.
Health and safety, of course. But as soon as I said, would you like to be in a... Sorry, he said, what do I do? I said, jump on a bike. He said, I'm in. Let me do it.
We were at a park.
Yeah. Except that place, it was supposed to be like, we'll go on a Sunday, it'll be nice and quiet, we'll do it. And about 20 million trucks turned up over the course of the day.
God.
And there is an element of real fear in Mike's eyes when he's...
Yeah.
Well, it was barking or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it was, the Docklands.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, far more filmed in London than we'd care to admit, I suppose.
Good point. There's Toby, our camera assistant as well, playing a miner.
Standing in very nicely.
Doing well. I know here's Norman.
Oh, this story coming up. Jeez.
Yeah,
this was probably the worst day's filming I think we had in the entire film.
I think this bit has a lovely lot of rain, which works lovely for the film because it emphasised the whole story was told during the rain, and Owen was desperate for it to rain on the day, but it absolutely chucked it down.
I said, this is our friend James, and I said to him, James, can you just stand there and act cold and wet? And he said, I think I can do that. And poor guy.
I remember my van broke down, so we packed the kit up. We finished at like 1 a.m. or something. Packed the kit up, and then my van didn't start, and I had to get a tow home that day.
That's
and then
right.
Unpack all the wet kit.
And this is the magic of worked again by Ben, isn't it?
Yeah, our CGI'd third lorry that wasn't actually there.
It was only 2.
2 lorries. I mean, getting 2 was pretty hard.
Yeah,
so.
But I just remember at the time it was pouring with rain and it was miserable. And yet, whenever we went for a take, it stopped raining. I was like, well, if we're going to go through all this misery, it's going to at least rain when we actually need it to rain. Yeah,
I mean, it was worth it, sort of.
It worked out. It worked out brilliantly.
And who knew that our friend James was the spitting image of Norman?
He wasn't overly keen on that when we showed him a picture of Norman. When I showed him Norman younger, he went,
he also wasn't keen. We made him shave his beard off that day.
He didn't like that, did he? Yeah, that was, God bless him.
And this is I think one of the kind of really great bits of the film, because it really shows something that the other films don't, which is sort of the joy and the solidarity and the fun of the strike, and also just great archive cut together the way with the music.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's the specials, isn't it? This, which is another great 80s band that we wanted to include and very supportive of the film. But it's I mean, how many times have you seen something where it's fun to be on strike? It's especially about something like the miners' strike, where it's a grim time, really difficult. And actually, the miners we were speaking to, it's about the euphoria of what they're feeling, what they felt when they, because the sense of being able to do something about your situation and actually being able to fight back and not just be sort of, under attack.
I do also. I always imagine when I see that clip of the guys walking like that, I sort of wonder. I always think sun cream. They just didn't worry. They just didn't worry about it. Or when they have the Corn Not Doll stickers, which look like sometimes they're covering their nipples on some of them.
You've been watching a different Miners' strike. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, there's good old Arthur getting kissed by a lady. He seems to enjoy that.
That pops up quite a lot in a lot of archive, actually. To be fair. It's Betty Cook. Yeah.
It's Cookie.
Now this was an interesting day because we filmed all the interviews with women over the course of a day, and for a number of them we hadn't actually met them and didn't know, and we didn't even know who was going to be turn up.
It was Ian again.
It was Ian, in South Elmsall. This is
this down around the corner from the Frickley Colliery,
and this is where Frickley Soup Kitchen was. So Paul, who the miner with grey hair at Frickley, he was in that soup kitchen every day during the strike. Yeah.
And there's Joyce.
And that was a picture of Joyce, wasn't it, from 1995?
And also Joyce, you guys found it, didn't you? Because
the same day,
Paul.
Actually. The same day.
Yeah, we went and met her in a pub after. We'd been looking at that as a location. We met Joyce in the pub afterwards.
And she is Joe's mother-in-law.
Yes, that's right.
Yes. Yeah. Because he's married to a daughter of a miner as well.
Yeah.
And she just came along to the pub and was an absolutely amazing character.
We were like, great, we'll do some interviews next week, come along. And she was brilliant, Joyce. Yeah. She's been great.
And has been, fantastic sort of as a champion of the film, really, as well, isn't she?
And really interesting. It was really important for us as well to have strong women characters in the film, because it's not something, again, that I don't think you see enough of films about the miners' strike and getting that, having that.
This is another one. This is the conference at Sheffield, isn't it, where they took the vote, and these photographs are amazing.
Again, for 3D layered, aren't they, to do it? But the photographs in general, because we had a number of photographers, wasn't it? John Harris, John Sturrock, Martin Shakeshaft, many others who all gave their work to the film and the negatives that had never been developed before, so we could actually have photos of whole scenes that had never been seen. Really amazing.
And I think it helps you capture in some ways the emotion. You get a moment to think about it and absorb it in a way that you don't always get with the video archive, because you get that kind of frozen moment in time, that emotion. Well,
there's something, especially some of them, that are really timeless. There's something that don't feel like they're from any particular period. Some of them.
Norman there as well.
Oh, that's Norman Strike, right? And the front with the what's that? Tartan jacket, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's quite a big bomber jacket, big 80s fashion. Back to Joyce again. But I don't think it's true. The photos just...
They're really stunning. Incredible. I think the fact they're in black and white as well, just to give that sort of timeless quality, that snapshot.
That's fantastic. It's almost like an entire generation.
Yeah. Well, that's again, you just see how young people were as well, because a lot of miners, especially, Joe and Paul and things, were very young when the strike started. They're just like 18, 19. And this is Which Side Are You On, which obviously Ken Loach has been amazing in supporting the film. As well, and what was great about the using Which Side Are You On archive and Scargill, Scargill's wife. What was amazing about this footage is Ken Loach was the only person who decided to shoot the miners' strike on film.
Yeah.
And actually give it again a cinematic quality and treat working class stories as something important to be told.
Because otherwise, you'd never see this element of this footage of the solidarity. I mean, I certainly haven't seen it that widely shown, and you wouldn't really be able to bring to life these amazing stories about the snails.
Yeah, these we didn't know these guys were going to turn up, did they? They just turned, and they actually. So we filmed them in the soup kitchen that they actually worked in during the strike. Really, they're hilarious characters.
And they're fantastic for and also having all three of them together. I think is really we haven't used it that widely. but it really works with them because they kind of really complement each other.
Yeah, well, just really, you know, ordinary. Well, this is the whole point. Ordinary people,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
who are involved.
Telling you all about what it was like for them.
You know, this always gets me. You know, I think this is one of the most powerful bits in terms of the singing and the music that comes from the strikers themselves. You know, that kind of all coming together. I know this particular bit has brought a few people to tears, which is kind of unusual, really.
I think it's also the fact that, again, all that footage is miners' own tapes that they've made themselves. And you can really feel that because they're right, you know, it's you're on their side rather than, you know, or in the middle with them, not a news report that's sort of looking at the whole thing from a distance, you know.
That's the same way the photos, I suppose, because a lot of the news footage is from the opposite side to the miners, whereas all the photographers are right in there with the striking miners, involved with them on that. So you get slightly different versions of, or a different portrayal of what was going on, and that's why you could get some of those great images.
I think she's brilliant as well. Yeah, no, that's
great.
Absolutely.
Her words ring in my ear. Tooth and nail.
No, it's absolutely right
Some
about the
great
photographers,
lines,
though, because the reason that they've got all the photos is they were the only photographers that the miners trusted. They were, you know, reporting for various political newspapers and things like that, and actually gained the miners' trust, and so got these incredible images that news reporters simply couldn't get.
Yeah, no, it's great. Good old Steve again. I do love Steve.
Well, it's just his amazing poetic way of speaking, isn't it?
And just, you know, people not trained at all, never been on camera before, and just so natural listening to them and having them talk. But I mean, it was not surprising having met them, but you know.
But then I think, you know, with Steve, it's that interesting thing of, obviously, if you know, the reason I think he became so good is because he also, talking over such a long period where he's going through all the ups and downs of the strike, you could see him build up to these moments as he's talking. That was just, you know, he was heavily involved as he's speaking, you know. Yeah, so it's obviously a really key thing that we wanted to get into the film, which was Nottingham, because obviously the way that the film is structured is actually to get across the sort of first few weeks of the euphoria of what the strike was about, but then obviously this is actually the first big challenge of the strike, which was basically happening in parallel, you know, which was the issue that Nottingham hadn't come out.
Yeah, that there were lots of miners in Nottingham that were still going into work, and I think it was really important that we sort of spoke to our guys quite early on about what they thought about this and why this had happened. And I think we wanted to go to them, they were the guys on the ground, what it was like that some of that union wasn't on strike and why they thought that had happened.
I think it's a thing that comes across, well, one that hopefully comes across from the film over and over again, is a sort of idea of division versus solidarity, that all the way, as happens over the rest of the course of the film from here on in really, is this idea of each time they're fighting division, and that might be the police dividing them, that might be the use of the media or things like that, but it's also the fact that there's these really key divisions within their own union, and what they use to sort of overcome that is attempts at solidarity. So, you know, they describe how they're trying to get down to Nottingham to sort of be able to build solidarity and make the arguments to them, or whether it's trying to get around police roadblocks by working together, or you know, to overcome divisions later by gaining support from others in the trade union movement. It's that constant battle between trying to pull people together to fight as a sort of common cause, and how they're sort of pulled apart. And I think Nottingham is the key battleground.
And I think what was really amazing as well is there are lots of things that, lots of different reasons for why Nottingham kind of didn't participate in the strike, and I think that was really interesting as well from our point of view, that there wasn't a single reason why they didn't take part. It was geography, it was political, it was local, and I think that's something our guys really, you know, they give different answers because it is a complex issue. But
also, I mean, it's important to say, and there wasn't, sadly, enough time to really talk about this in detail, but every miner, you know, was really, you know, felt it important to stress how a lot of Nottingham did come out on strike. Not enough to make the difference, but they did. And we obviously talked a lot about whether to include a Nottingham miner in the film, and the slight problem we had was that actually everything happened in Nottingham that happened over the rest of the year for everybody else, whether it was the villages being occupied by the police or the use of the media or people going back to work. All of that happened in Nottingham right from the beginning, and if we'd actually explored Nottingham with a Nottingham miner and everything, we almost wouldn't have had anything else to say about the strike. You know, it's its own story really about how, you know, really insane situation that people were put in.
You know, my grandmother was in Nottingham very early on in the strike. She had miners staying in her house, and she had neighbours come round and threaten her, essentially, because and that was just someone staying. So what it would be like if you were actually a miner on strike would be really intense.
Yeah.
Well, it's like we said before, there's so many stories, and we'll say it again, you could make 10 films about the miners' strike, you could make more than that, and not, like you say, Nottingham is its own kind of area, and to have to talk to those people who'd love to be able to do it. Maybe the sequel.
Yeah. I remember speaking to one Nottingham miner who...
Charlie Sheen.
Yeah, Charlie Sheen, yeah. A.k.a. Jeff Poulter, who was a miner that we did talk to and consider putting in the film. Who was, I think, Derbyshire and Nottingham, which had their own relationship. But I remember speaking to one Nottingham miner he was on strike, but his brother and father were going back to work, and actually, the whole families were divided over issues like this. But again, it's about getting this idea that how did the miners respond? Well, they responded by trying to get down there and make the argument. And I think that's a lot about what they saw as being the biggest problem, is that they simply couldn't get to Nottingham because of the police that we later see coming in, couldn't get to Nottingham to be able to speak to people.
And where they had got to Nottingham to speak to people, they were actually able to convince initially a lot of Nottingham miners to come out on strike.
Yeah, I tell you, trying to weave the story together out of, with all these real complexities in the strike was something that our edit producer Amelia Lavington and myself really struggled with at times, but it was about trying to get that across and keep those stories.
Police were drafted into Nottinghamshire tonight, doubling the county's normal strength. The reinforcements have come from all...
This is obviously the news commentary describing 3,000 police going in. And actually, when we first started, the miners were telling us these things, and I never in a million years dreamed that there would actually be archive footage of any of it. I just thought they were talking about...
Centre. I really,
And it's clearly stated there are 3,000 police going from 18 police forces into Nottingham. You think these are sort of almost not conspiracy theories, but almost these are their take on events. And actually, over and over again, we'd find reams of news footage really sort of backing up what they were saying.
And we'd also often find our guys in the background of archive footage that we didn't actually end up including a lot of it, but a lot of the stories they would tell us, we then find them in clips. And it almost became a little bit of a game for a while. It's like, is that Paul with a different haircut and a moustache?
It's the nature of the way we've made the film, though, because we've not done a sort of simply personal accounts of people going through old photos and videos and things that wanted to tell a narrative story of the strike. It means you can't, if you include it, you'd have to then have them explain that was them and all that sort of thing. But there's loads of stuff in them.
I love the old school police vans.
Oh, Black Mariah, it's scary if you're there at the time.
Yeah, I just like the look. It's just.
Well, see, look at that! Like literally, there's a police barrier stopping anyone walking down the street, like an actual human shield.
Yeah. Well, there's this clip coming up here which is Yvette Vanson's film that was made during the strike, Taking Liberties, for the BBC. And again, have been asked a number of times whether this is real or whether we've reconstructed this. Because you don't expect to find footage of the police stating openly that they're essentially breaking the law and stopping you're not allowed to be a striking miner in Nottingham.
Remember Yvette told us about this when we met her, and I was like, that happened on film, and then we saw it and I was like, it's exactly how she described it. I can't believe that exists.
Although interestingly, she said they'd considered driving on and getting arrested and getting that on tape, and in the end they decided not to and turned around. But that would have made for a quite interesting view.
Would have made this slightly different.
Yeah.
Well, it might not. It's a bit of a what if, because if they'd been arrested, you don't know what the police would have done to the video footage.
That's true, actually. Perhaps it wouldn't have got out.
But again, films that were made around the time by people with miners. Another example of that. Just archive of that we managed to dig out of. From made by not by miners but with miners along. They had a good trust of the miners and stuff while they made it.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, this is a good story.
Yes.
Do you know what? I keep every time I see him, I'd go, "Is Will Pickett real?" And he'd go, "Yeah, no, definitely is real." I'm still not convinced that he is actually a real character.
He's not real, Owen.
Is he not?
He's definitely not real. He's absolutely having you on.
I really want to think that he is.
Isn't one of the Frickley women? Isn't there?
She's
Her
not
name's
called Will
Pickin.
Pickin, close enough.
Close enough. Who's her husband?
If she does
Will
Will
Pickett,
Pickin.
most definitely Norman Strike.
Have you actually confirmed this?
Yes.
Oh, that's a shame. I wanted to live in the hope that Will Pickett might.
And then I haven't confirmed it. No, I'm just.
All right, good.
It could still be true.
Okay.
There is a Will Pickett
You're ruining the magic.
This story.
Oh, that's Alex, our
Wearing
researcher.
entirely my clothes.
Yeah.
But surprisingly, I have 80s jogger outfit.
There was a lot of
apparently.
argument about what colour tracksuit you should wear, and it was like, it's black and white.
Yeah.
You know,
That's actually a Hibs top.
Oh, is it?
That's
Slide
also
it
the day you had a slight accident in the
Yeah, we don't talk about
Oh, we don't talk about that.
No.
in the
That's
van.
me. That's me underneath it on the bottom of it.
You're one of many appearances in this
Yeah,
film,
I'm in the
actually.
film a little bit. Yes.
Also, I'm particularly proud, you'll see it later, I'll point it out, but that this car is exactly the same car as then appears in Archive.
Yeah, later on. It's lovely, Dan, who we got the car from.
Dan's
and
Action Vehicles.
Yeah, he was great, Dan. What a legend. And he agreed to play Paul in the story.
A Yorkshire pub, aka Enfield in London.
This was your voice for a long time until we got rid of it.
Thankfully removed.
Yeah, thank God for
I'm
that.
not saying that you can't do a great Yorkshire accent.
That's me again in the back of there as well.
It's also, it was actually a brown car, proper brown. Back in the day when a brown car was a normal thing.
I used
you
to
don't
have
see them
that.
anymore.
I used to
Yeah,
have
look
that.
at this car.
Is it? Oh, wait, is it this one coming up?
You can't tell by the wipers. There it is, look.
Oh yeah,
It's the same car.
Oh yeah, this leads into a slightly more chilling story.
Yes, it does actually. Again, an unbelievable story in a lot of ways until we don't actually have all the photos, but until literally shown a photo of the police going up the hard shoulder and then the smash.
This again, the reconstruction's coming up. One of our friends, and we said, "Do you want to smash a window up?" And he was like, "Yes,
Yes,
absolutely,
please.
100%."
And I think
That's me.
That's you. I think my brother makes a small appearance in this one.
Yeah, he does
yes,
very
he
soon.
He'll be Danny Harris. He wanted a credit at the end.
But you know, it really. I think when we filmed this, actually, it drives home how terrifying it would
was
be
really scary.
to be. You know, when you're actually in the
It was
car and
scary.
that happening to you.
It was
you know.
scary filming it.
All
It
health
was-
and safety, I like to point out, was all met.
Don't worry. Yeah.
But it was even when we were filming it, you don't understand how much glass smashes, how far it goes, how terrifying it would be
Yeah.
to have that coming towards your face, and
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, it's scary.
It's another great bit from Which Side Are You On? Actually, obviously
Yeah.
not that we've re-edited it, but the
The
song.
song's brilliant. I love this bit in the film. It's one of my
It's
favourite
very
sequences.
creepy.
It's creepy, isn't
It's
it?
so
Yeah,
creepy.
it's-
But surprisingly, I really remember singing that song as a kid when I was growing up.
Oh really?
And I just, like as a school song, and I haven't really heard it since then, so it must be an 80s thing.
Well, I don't know. I'd like to know more about it actually. Whether it was a traditional song or whether it was he'd written it for the.
Yeah.
Post the
strike,
strike.
yeah.
But I definitely.
Well, it's during the strike because it was filmed in the
In
very
the
late,
strike.
early '85, I think. Which Side Are You On?
Yeah.
Fighting on the picket line with
So back to Paul.
Out in my favourite place in the world.
Yeah,
In
scorching
Southampton.
quickly. Yeah.
This was quite a kind of a
Tough moment to.
tough moment
film,
to
yeah.
when we were interviewing him, because we sort of were talking more generally about the strike, and then we had to kind of bring up something that obviously is quite painful for Jip. Is the story of his friend being killed, and they were both obviously very young together, and I think we don't include it in the film, but Paul tells a story about how he was literally talking to Davy Jones 5 minutes
Yeah.
before he was killed on the picket line, and he didn't find out till the next night,
Yeah.
and they'd just been discussing kind of his car being broken down and Jip's
Yeah.
brother fixing it, and then the next time he heard about Davy, he had died,
Yeah.
which is sort of...
And we didn't think, because we knew that he was Davy's friend before, but actually we weren't sure that he would even be willing to talk about it actually, because it's still very, very painful for him. But
And even doing the reconstruction, you get a feeling for how scary it would have been. You guys got kind of these...
not just that, two or three miners were there as actors, extras, who had actually been on that picket line as well. I mean, it was like really, you had 50 or 60 miners, and then a few people dressed up as police, and then you put them and you tell them to have a confrontation. It's
Just looking at that, you can see how young Davy was when he was...
young guy. And very, very early on in the strike, this happened. It really changed the
I
atmosphere.
think Jip said it was the third picket line he ever went on.
Yeah, Paul. Yeah, it was one of Paul's early picket lines, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a matter of weeks. Well, almost days.
Yeah. I think this footage as well, because we found it difficult to find footage of
the
funeral.
Well, again, it was,
And
but
after.
even of the picket line, I think there was only one photo
Yeah.
had ever been published of that picket line,
Yeah.
and the photographers had, again, boxes of negatives that were able to help us sort of paint the picture of what had happened, but it's still very, very difficult.
Yeah,
And then-
it wasn't as widely covered because of the news reports. They're from Mace archives. They're from like the Midlands
they got
archives.
onto it sort of the next day.
Yeah.
Obviously it happened on the picket line, and then the news sort of caught up with it.
Yeah.
And what's most shocking is this event was actually what Thatcher used as an excuse to send in more and more police to Nottingham, rather than de-escalating the situation. Actually, massively escalated it, and this is also really
hard to watch, really. But yeah, as you say, Mark, the photos that are coming up in a moment were, again, I think, of the photos that were in the film, one had been published, but we were then, able to sort of build up a picture because, again, the photographers, as we say, by having gained the trust of the miners, were in amongst the funeral,
I think what Jip says about unions and what it really means to be part of a union is really poignant at this point. And I think it was really key for us to try and get that across. But it's obviously quite a somber moment in the film, and always tough for us, even though we've seen it a lot and we've talked to Jip a lot. Still, for us, it's still quite a difficult one to look at. But these are the photos you were talking about, weren't they? The ones.
Well, he really meant it. It wasn't. This was the thing. It wasn't. It was his best friend died, and that was a really personal moment. And yet, it was part like his best friend had been fighting for the strike, and they wanted, sort of in David's memory, to really carry on the strike. It was no ounce when we spoke to him of any hint of wanting to stop the strike or stop fighting.
And what's amazing is we actually spoke to Norman, who didn't know Davy Jones personally, but he also told a story that wasn't in the film, about going down to the funeral in his suit with the banner from Durham, all the way from Durham. And so it really made it feel like it was personal for Jip, but also it was a big turning point for a lot of miners in the strike.
Norman got arrested on the way, or not arrested, but stopped by police on the way to the funeral and turned back, and he wasn't able to attend.
I didn't know
that.
Yeah,
the police actually stopped him from attending the funeral. So he was, I think, just that sort of behaviour really just galvanised the anger even more.
Yeah, definitely.
So again, this footage is Yvette Vanson as well, because she's massively supportive, did from her film Battle of Orgreave, which came out in 1985, so immediately after the strike, basically, and after the trials of Orgreave, of the miners who'd been arrested there, which then inspired Jeremy Deller's film after that.
Yeah, it's great film, and some great footage that she's got in there. Again, from the point, talking to striking miners from their point of view, really great bit of work done straight after strike, so timely at the time to be able to bring that out and show that no one actually did get
and also the way it's made as well. I think we all found that it was like one of the most amazingly visually kind of shot pieces of footage from directly after the strike. It's composed and it's beautiful in some ways.
Because I think in some ways it's easy. It's interesting in some ways that this film is, it's controversial. It's from the miners' point of view, but actually it's in some ways easy to make a historical documentary like this 30 years on. A lot more tough when you're making a film that's literally 1985 or Ken Loach's Which Side Do You Want?
So more and more obviously Orgreave and
this footage here, which is the day that Scargill was arrested. It's interesting that the documents have come out. Scargill has claimed to be given documents that show premeditation by the police that they planned to arrest him that day. So that might be an issue that actually continues to roll on now. I mean, because a lot, obviously, with the 30-year rule, things like that are now coming out quite regularly.
And especially with Orgreave, the Truth and Justice campaign and all that stuff, trying to get an inquiry into what happened.
In order to ensure it were a victory. Eventually they did, and final call came from Union, all pickets to Orgreave.
What we've got is an attempt to substitute...
And obviously Joe was talking a bit earlier about Orgreave. Sort of, he was one of the early...
He was one of the first four miners to
that was it.
To start picketing Orgreave.
I think what was amazing when we were looking through footage as well, do you remember that like a lot of the stuff which was said, about the miners' violence was actually just in commentary but not actually in visuals? Like when we were trying to find things to show that actually the miners had fought back a bit and there'd been a bit of hustle and tussle, actually all the footage from the news is just the miners getting beaten up.
And that's it. I mean, I suppose in some ways there's probably more at Orgreave than I was able to find anywhere else. I mean, it was something all the way through the strike, because it was a real narrative at the time. It was obviously miners' violence, and Orgreave was the key moment in that really said the miners are violent and the police trying to maintain order, and that was something that really stuck with them. And as you say, I think however many news clips we went through, 2,000 I think news clips specifically, that can almost find nothing other than in commentary.
Well, it was very
So
Ron, who we just saw. He talked. I mean, it doesn't
Oh,
not
yeah,
so
so
much
this
in the
is Ron,
film, but yeah,
Welshman,
later
yeah.
on he talked. I know. Remember in our interview, he talked a lot about that. How for him watching it on the news and suddenly it's like, what? We didn't do anything. Like how? Why are we being portrayed as violent?
Well, that's it. Didn't he say that it had impact on the miners themselves? Including some miners who've been less active or in different areas, thought that maybe the miners in Yorkshire are particularly violent. Or there was, and actually for the ones who were at Orgreave, it really, I think Ron particularly was really shocked. I mean, he said to us, I'd grown up in the 50s, when a policeman was a man to be respected, part of the community and things like that, and he was just pretty amazed to suddenly find himself in this situation.
It was
This stuff is incredible as well, because they actually showed a lot of this footage on the mainstream news, but it would be like the miners attacked the police. Look at.
Well, this they timed this push in court, and apparently it was something like, I can't remember the exact figure, but I think 38 seconds or something the push lasted for. In the entire thing, and that was the footage that was sort of used over and over again to justify the police retaliation, as we see.
Yeah.
And this is, in some ways, you look at this. Oh, this is horribleness. I think it's the jerky camera as well, gives you a real
filmed up the tree, which this footage actually had a huge impact on what happened, because there were loads of miners who were arrested after Orgreave, went to trial, potentially facing life in prison, some of them, and it was only because of this footage filmed up a tree that the police had no idea about, that completely overturned everything that the police had been saying, and it made all the cases collapse. And obviously it was legal work done by lawyers like Gareth Pearce and Michael Mansfield and things, but this footage was absolutely critical in what happened.
It feels more. I think you're right. The camera action, and just you can see leaves in front of it, whereas the tree, it just makes.
I think also you almost feel the fear. Being in there, what it would be like to sort of be crowded round. This bit is particularly because you can hear the guy saying,
Get off me, yeah.
Get off me, and they're telling him to get up and bend his arm back, and he's saying, how can I? And you can see his head smashed open, and they're essentially trying to break his arm.
I like how we kept hold of his flat cap though, we did one.
I mean, the thing about this as well, is that obviously it seems wrong to be talking about a sort of filmic perspective. This is real terrifying events for people, but it was also, I think, important, the decision we made to not, there's news footage at the beginning and there's news footage at the end, but everything else is the miner's eye view, shot by a miner for the entire sequence, and it was important to do that, to be, if we're telling the story from the miner's point of view, that actually we stay with this one camera.
And also, you can see when people say they had their shirts off, they were relaxed, and you talk about kind of the violence one side to the other. These guys literally are shirtless. There's no protection whatsoever, and the police have shields and their truncheons. And I think that real contrast between the naked miners and the police is quite stark in the home footage.
Such a hot day there, wasn't it, as well?
Yeah.
That's what they say about.
And it's important because, again, the footage of there's been quite a lot of talk about the fact that footage of the stone throwing there was shown at the beginning of news reports and made to look as if it was the police retaliating to that, whereas we've tried our best to basically put it in chronological time of where it happened in context, because there was violence, miners did react violently as well, in retaliation to what was happening.
And also, I suppose it has to be put in context of the strike. This isn't the first. For some miners, it was the first brush that they'd had with the police. For other miners, this is something that they'd experienced day in, day out on a picket line from quite early on.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's also, I think it's important to say, and why Ron, as a Welsh miner, comes in at this point, even though obviously Wales have been out on strike for some time, is it represented a moment in the strike, and it's therefore a moment in the film where it brings all of the characters together, and all the strikers. It was a national action that literally drew people from Scotland, from Wales, and around England, all into this one central battle. And it wasn't the only turning point in the strike, but it was a really key moment that had a defining effect on the strike.
It's when we went back there, because we had to look around, didn't we?
Around Orgreave,
and just what a normal place it is to think of all the stuff that happened there.
Yeah.
This is another bit where music, I think, really helps bring the kind of film to life. Really, that the Welsh choir singing.
Yeah, South Wales male striking choir. Wind Test Department, an industrial 80s band.
Yeah. I actually have this song stuck in my head every morning when
Oh,
I'm in
really?
the shower. Yeah, I think it's a beautiful
well, this was
piece
an
of
important
music.
album. It was again, it just shows the sort of culture in the 80s. Is you've got an industrial sort of political band, and then the South Wales Striking Miners Choir, coming together to make a single album. And that photo it's actually there's 3 or 4 photos that you can see in sequence as the policeman approaches if you unearth them.
And he wasn't even a minor, was he, that guy?
It was a 16-year-old kid who just turned up, yeah.
That was Arthur, wasn't it?
No.
It's just another man. Chucking bits of blood across.
Who then obviously appears in footage. And so now we're back in news footage.
Yeah. It's just, they talk about it, and we heard them talk about Orgreave, and obviously it's quite a pinnacle part of the strike, and one that, is quite famous in a way, or infamous.
Infamous.
Yeah. But you just didn't, until we look at it and we went through the footage and stuff, you just didn't quite realise quite how brutal and tough it was for them on that day.
And how we really, it's obviously with the film is from the miners' point of view, and we're listening to those interviews, but also we're trying to find the footage to tell, as truthful as well. We're not just trying to back up what they're saying, and yet that is the footage of what happened. And it seems to confirm what they're saying.
Yeah. And then obviously the news reports were slightly different after that.
Yeah, we explored quite a lot how we were going to get across the how the media portrayed the strike, didn't we? We initially thought about it as its own separate section, and then we sort of thought it would tie nicely with Orgreave to make it very clear what is the most stark example of the experiences of the miners contrasting with the news, and Orgreave is literally the most brutal example of it. I mean, it happened all the way through the strike, where people would be on picket lines and they'd get beaten up by the police, and the next day it would be reported that they had been attacking the police and been violent. But I think Orgreave really opened a lot of people's eyes to.
Yeah, but it was like many things in the film. Is that, as I say, we weren't set out to make an argument in favour of the strike or anything like that. Present it as their story, and therefore, actually, although we did have material of people specifically saying why the media was the way it was and things, it was better to just show it in context of what happened and let it sort of speak for itself, really.
Yeah. The bit where at the end is where it stops there. I remember when I were online and someone was like, "Is that supposed to do that?" I was like, "Don't worry, it's part of the film."
Do you know, I think I was sitting next to Jim when we watched it in Sheffield, and he went, "Oh no, it's broken."
Like, no, don't worry.
I was like, no, it's fine, Jim.
I did remembering watching that back again. I forgot Ron was wearing your jumper for that interview.
Oh yeah, he was cold. Well, we were filming that in the bottom of Bristol Town Hall, weren't we?
Yeah. It was cold. I think he had a stripy top on.
It is the dangers of filming in derelict locations. To be honest.
Yeah, they're always a bit chilly.
Yeah, poor Jim here was freezing. To be honest,
I remember when we did Joe's one, and we were using an ex-NHS clinic lorry to make our tea in.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Well,
one of the many joys.
One of my famous lunches out the back boot of my car, sandwiches and tea.
Yeah.
Always
I mean,
fun.
this is an interesting section actually, because there is again a whole history of the miners' strike wasn't the only thing happening. At that point, there's a world of other stuff, and also things like the dock strikes that they're talking about is a big story in itself. But I think it's part of it. It's about just trying to convey enough of what's going on without sort of getting involved.
It's very interesting, the docker strike, because again, it's a whole story in of itself, because that's another industry that's essentially disappeared from Britain, and so it's hard to go into too much detail about the dock strike because it's complex and it's its own story. So, but it was one of the key things. I mean, Margaret Thatcher's papers now released. She says, they actually made calculations about how long they could go with a dock strike before they'd have to bring in the army.
Yeah, I mean that it seems to be from the documents that these declassified documents. The dock strike was probably the biggest moment where they could have won, and it was interesting because obviously we made this film and shot those interviews before the documents came out. I think we were filming over 2013, and the documents came out I think January 2014. Yeah. And actually, everything that miners had said about the times that they felt that they could have won, and the times that they felt that the government were wobbling and things like that was then confirmed by those documents. It was quite interesting.
It's also interesting. We did a research interview with a docker about the strike, and I think talking about other communities is impacted, it's kind of, there's a whole swathe of community in East London and Liverpool which had a very, very tight relationship with the miners, and the miners' strike was probably as big a blow for them as it was for the miners themselves.
Yeah. Well, interesting, another area that we never managed to get into the film was Kent, you know, which obviously it was Kent miners and had very good relationship with London and also the docks and things like that. But it's
a lot of the shops of the journalists and stuff were Fleet Street journalists they would raise money for the Kent miners, and the Kent miners were in London a lot of the time. So.
Yeah, I love all this stuff. There's so many people on this march. It's just a great.
Yeah, the scale is huge. Again, that's shot by miners. That footage, a lot of the great stuff. Really, I think it's been one of the real joys actually of making the film is not just seeing the same old news footage about something, but to really unearth, and it actually gives you a completely different side, you know.
And these trucks are amazing. They so people would I think people underestimate the scale as well. So 160,000 miners had to be fed basically
every day, and their whole families
by donations. So people were literally sending boxes and boxes of stuff up, and some really interesting people involved.
Although, what was it Ron said? He said people would, they'd be even sending you clothes. You wouldn't let your dog wear it, but at the same time, people were sending it.
Yeah, that and spaghetti that you didn't know how to cook.
Spaghetti they didn't know how to cook.
Oh, and that's isn't that Paul Mason?
No, he's later.
He's later.
Yeah, I love this kebabs for everybody.
Yeah, well, this is a Turkish solidarity campaign. Yeah, and that's French. I mean, again, it was something that we did talk about, but we had to sort of show visually. But the level of international solidarity that miners had was massive. They're getting South African, France, Scandinavia, America.
From quite a lot of the footage though, there's a lot of cornflakes. I feel like cornflakes maybe carry out some PR campaign during this film.
Look at the size of that. It's huge. So this character who's speaking here is Mike Jackson, who obviously Pride, which has been it seems to be an absolutely massive film, and he's a central character in it, who's another just amazing person, and Gary, who was a student supporter. Because again, you could make they have made a Hollywood style film about just one support story, and actually there's the miners' strike. What's incredible is when you bring tens of thousands of people, or hundreds of thousands of people all into contact with each other, all for the first time. There's a million of those stories.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of a hidden. What I really found when I was sort of watching the footage of Mike Jackson, and also we interviewed another one of the lesbian gay minor support group with Ray, was actually the tail of the strike goes on well into the 80s for the gay rights. The miners, the NUM was the first union to put a no homophobia platform in 1985, and that's why it was adopted by the rest of the TUC and the Labour Party. So without the miners, homophobia wouldn't have become a really big issue in this country to combat it. But without the gay support, that would have never got on the agenda of the NUN. So it's really interesting how one feeds into the other.
And how, we talk about one of the reasons why the strike was so important, I suppose, is because when one, group of people are fighting back, it does, as Steve says, it becomes a beacon for everybody, and it's incredible. You'd never think it, gay and lesbian support group with miners, and actually it became a sort of natural relationship, but one that they all had to, work on and fight for, really, to make it happen.
And I think also it's a bit, Joe particularly emphasises in this story, is the coming together of the students and workers who kind of of the same age group, but very, very different backgrounds, very, very different ideas, and be able to feed one into the other. So the miners becoming more confident in their ideas because they're talking to people about theory and politics and things like that, which they've never come across before. And the students moving away from the dusty classroom where they've got all these great ideas, but they don't do anything essentially, to meeting people on the ground.
It's for our generation as well. You just forget how many more people now can go to university and have access to education that wasn't necessarily happened in the 80s. Well, it was beginning to, but definitely not so much in 84, and it's just a great way for, the miners learning and getting to talk to people.
Well, to hear it, Joe, it's just a fantastic story, because you would never think, I think, listening to him now, that he would be worried about speaking or that he felt uneducated and things. And he's a history teacher now, and a lot of where that came from is he gained his confidence from being active and doing things like that,
This might be my favourite cameo of the entire film.
It's not this bit, yeah.
Oh, is it not this bit?
No, don't worry. I know which bit you're talking about, will be later. This is the good... we do have some good reconstruction here, though, from Mike's story.
Well, probably not as good as Pride. No, not same budget. But, we tried. But this is shot on location in Delice Valley. Our trip to Wales.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a really, you know, this was the thing. It's no surprise that a big film like Pride, there's Mike in the middle there.
Yeah, that's the line. That's right.
No surprise really that it's become, well, it is a surprise in a way, you know, because it's an unusual story, but it's such an incredible story.
Yeah.
You know, when we you know, in 3 minutes, for me, Mike becomes the star of the film because it's, you know, it's just.
Well, many people say it's the most moving bit of the entire.
Yeah, it's heartrending.
I think didn't Chris Starr exact cry a little bit when he saw it?
Sure, he won't mind to say it.
He doesn't mind that kind of thing. Yeah, good old Mike. And we this is again our lovely North London.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
With a few people that we know again in the background. It's not, you know.
That's the director of photography's children.
Yeah, exactly.
They made a cameo.
Yeah.
That's it. He was actually on the picket line where Davy Jones was killed. Actually, yeah, he was a miner.
That's Mark's girlfriend
And my girlfriend. Yeah.
Yeah. They get close-ups, but we won't.
I think Rebecca's been in every film that Mark's ever made.
Wow, not every, but a few, 1 or 2.
So, yeah, it was. I think this moment it sums up everything you could ever say about solidarity and what they felt about it. It was so much more than donating money or keeping a strike going. It was actually about people's ideas were just changing and flourishing through it. And the gay and lesbian support story is one of many, but actually really.
Like it says here, you know, it's just it made it. If he was coming home from him, do you know what I mean? It made him feel, you know, acceptance from these groups of people. Made him feel, you know, it was great for him.
I think everyone. I don't think there's a single person, and we even just watched the rushes that didn't become teary. I think when they heard this story, it's incredible.
Yeah, good old Mike. Though, you know, one of our few swear words, but it's worth it.
Yeah, one of our few. It's the problem, you know. Miners like to swear.
We didn't even notice how many times people
It's
swore.
also in good humour, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
all
fun,
fun.
you know.
Yeah, no, Steve says a beacon for everybody.
Yeah. Well, again, we had so much more stories, you know, because we had Mike obviously took us through, basically, you know, the story of Pride essentially, and what, you know, and how the miners ended up marching at the head of Gay Pride and all the rest of it. But yeah, it's just, you know, as you want to try and encapsulate as much as you can in the film, but while dealing with all the different kinds of support, the students, black support, gay support, and then of course the role of women. And
I think Joyce is one of the, you know, she really brings a new element to the film.
That's Paul Mason, he's now Channel 4.
And kind of really shows how women's kind of role sort of started off on one place and then ended up in a much broader position in the strike. You know, they started off doing the support, you know, what we saw at the beginning, the soup kitchens and everything else. And by the end of it, they were really at the forefront. Sometimes they were going picketing when the men couldn't go picketing because they'd been arrested and been put on bail.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they were still ordinary people. They had families, they had things to go. So it was really a tough struggle, I think, but also one that I don't think any of them regret because they came out stronger at the other end.
And I think that's why it was key for us to, which side are you on again? It was key for us, I think, for the women not to feel in any way tokenistic in the film as well, to not treat it as, and now we'll do a section on women, but to have, so that they have a story arc, they start, it's the soup kitchens, and then it's going around the country doing speeches, and then onto the picket line, and then Joyce becomes our character in the film like any other.
Because I think we debated, we were going to do it just from the point of view of the miners,
of one group of miners,
and then we were like, well, actually it was the women's struggle as much as the men's. They had as much to lose, and they did lose as much in some cases as the men, and they also gained as much. They were transformed in the same way.
And some ways gained more. Yeah.
Everyone's always smoking in the archive. Always forget, back in the 80s it was all about.
And I think the world has changed so much that this story that Betty tells is really good because it really sums up in a very simple anecdote, how women were treated before. They got taken to the working men's clubs, they got bought drinks and sat in the corner. And then from them suddenly to be interested in what she says, asking her questions.
And when she ends up on the picket line and leaves her husband at home.
Yeah.
Ron with your jumper on again.
He's great, Ron. Because Ron, obviously, remember, we'd been told about Ron really early on in the production, and ended up, I think we spent months thinking, well, we should speak to lots of other miners and get their stories. Spoke to miners all over Wales, went on BBC Wales, doing a shout out for miners, and in the end, he was the best. We went back to Ron.
I think I spoke to about 30 Welsh miners.
Yeah, but they're all great. I mean, there's really, really great stories. But
yeah, and gotta love Norman. This is a great bit of.
Well, this was the perfect time where we could use one of the pieces of archive that we had with our character, at the same time. And the Redskins, again, being supportive of the the film as a band. And the music that we used earlier for that montage of solidarity is also Redskins.
Yeah.
But you know, quite interesting that they're a very, very openly political band. You know, on a mainstream television, singing political songs. You know, it's hard to imagine though.
Yeah, on the Tube, which is sort of, slightly before our time.
There he is.
I love that earring. I don't know.
He looks a lot more like James than he
Well, of course, after this, he became, a bit of a minor celebrity, and he was on the cover of NME. Well, he was in NME, and he ended up going on tour with the Redskins.
Yeah.
He met Public Enemy, didn't he?
He went loads of it. He was constantly, hanging out with the stars.
He is a bit of a, minor celebrity.
Yeah. Well, he wrote a book called Strike by Name as well, which is diaries, isn't it? But yeah, he was the tambourine player for the Redskins.
Good old Norman. I love the bit about having a free. You've been on strike for a long time, and someone puts a rider in front of you. Like, he talks a little bit more in the interviews. He talks a lot more about quite how much he's like. I just have everything that's there.
It does make me laugh that his choice of drink is Triple Southern Comfort.
Triple Southern Comfort,
and Coke.
Yeah. Well, tell you what you can get. I love this guy's moustache. I'm a bit jealous of it.
But this was again it was made for Channel 4, but I think it was Here We Go, the documentary, but made by Co-op and miners and supporters at the time, which is fantastic.
We also interviewed another guy, Glenn Roy, who also spoke about the same sort of themes, but we didn't end up including him in the main thing. But he spoke also about how the black community, had been oppressed by the police and beaten up in Brixton, and then they see it on TV and they're like, wow, they're going after white guys as well now. And it's sort of real eye opener, and sort of they were instantly able to sympathise with them and show solidarity.
More similarities than differences, and it was be able to show up.
This is my favourite bit of the entire film.
This is Howard, who we didn't include much of, but he is a brilliant character, and he was like just an expert at collecting solidarity throughout the strike. Apparently, some miners would go out and they'd get a £1 or £2, and he'd come back with like £100.
Yeah, and this is.
Who's this?
And there was this tramp yet.
Is that Mark, the producer? This
is what making a film does to you.
What I love is we didn't even have to dress you up particularly.
That's clothes. I didn't even. Yeah, I do. Another one of my many cameos.
Yeah.
You need it more than we do. At that point in the film, we really did need it more.
It's an emotional moment though. But no, Howard he'd been ill, and so he'd been out of action basically until after Orgreave, so that's why we don't really follow his story. But
he owns racehorses now.
Yeah, he does,
Named
after political radicals and miners.
Yeah, Betty Whittle.
Janine's telly again.
Yeah.
Why does she have that?
She still works, and
she's been waiting for the moment that still the enemy came along.
Lives in her shed, but, I did have to warn her that Thatcher and Heath were going to be on it. So.
Well, this is.
Well, again, this was the footage that we really didn't think existed. We'd read that she'd said the enemy within. We'd really searched everywhere to try and find that, and then and then we had an archive researcher who unearthed it with the BBC, and it's it's said completely openly. It's another surprise.
Yeah.
And I think I think it's hard now to imagine what it would have been like if you were an ordinary person, because people are used to being accused of things by the state, but to be sort of an ordinary working class guy or woman, and you've just a lot of the miners would have been in the army, would have gone, been involved in the Falklands conflict and stuff, and then to sort of be labelled as kind of essentially terrorist is what she's calling them.
Well, there's actually footage in Yvette's film Battle of Orgreave where it has a woman who says one of my sons is a soldier in the Falklands and is labelled a hero, and the other one works down the mines and he's been labelled the enemy within, and just couldn't understand how.
And I think they sum it up very well, and they say, they're only on strike for their jobs. It's not like they are actually trying to bring down the government.
Exactly.
They just don't want to be sacked.
Their jobs, and it turned out that they were right. The mines were closed down. This is obviously a key moment because it was very important for us. We talked about this a lot, really, that to get across the fact that there was nothing inevitable about the defeat, and to try and make it a history. As Steve actually is not in the interview, but he said history is a living thing, and to get across the sense of the events as they unfolded and as they happened. And this was a really key moment that we wanted to build up, where it all seems inevitable now that you see didn't deliver the action that was required to win the strike. But at the time, there was a real sense that they at least should, you know.
Yeah, and if they had, it would have made a big difference,
Yeah,
a massive difference.
A huge difference.
You know what I mean?
It's a lesson I think everyone looks back at now and seems obvious, you know.
That words and clapping aren't enough, really.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
That's another very long TUC conference where I think we watched quite a lot of that.
But it was difficult as well because, you know, trade unionism was under attack. The miners, you know, the union NUM had their funds sequestered, you know, their assets taken away. They were under attack from the police and things like that. And it was difficult for other unions to come out, and openly support the miners. But
we had to do so much, to find out so much information about what even sequestered meant. You know, like all the funds that keeps a union running. So all the money that might have been strike pay, or you know, to pay for the demonstrations, pay the people who worked for the union, pay for the lawyers to help people who were being arrested, just completely taken by the government. And this is money that comes out of people's pay package. You know, they pay into the union from their own wages. So it's essentially.
Well, didn't the sequestrator of the NUM funds walk out on national television and say, "I am the NUM"? You know, as this one man had taken, has taken all the assets.
Unreal.
Yeah, this is again. Here we go. There was a huge amount of footage we found from these sort of film co-ops.
I love that it's filmed just in a pool hall.
In a pool hall? Well, why not?
Yeah, exactly. Like that. Good old Joe.
This, I remember Joe being really passionate. I didn't ask him any questions about this. He said, I've got to talk about the TUC, you know, and really, really wanted to get it across.
Yeah, he's very passionate about that and very eloquent as well.
Mm. Now this is, obviously we had to choose which story we wanted to sort of focus on the most as a key point that they could have won, and came out in the documents that revealed that this was another key moment in the strike. But I think it's just Steve tells the story so brilliantly, and it is a complicated story really about the deputies. And
it's another thing that we but we had to fight with in a film is we wanted to put across, they talk about relatively complex things that they know lots about, being able to make that so that people can understand and get that point. And I think this is a great example of that, where it could be a very complicated bit, because Steve's so great at telling the story and he's so eloquent about it makes it so interesting.
Well, I think it's a big thing for the miners, every single one that we spoke to. But I think one of the reasons they wanted to do it is they wanted to convey to a future generation. It wasn't just about talking to each other, and other miners about the strike. It was about trying to get across, what actually happened, and also the excitement and possibilities at this moment.
Well, I think absolutely. I think this is one of the bits which I like the most in the film, other than Mark's Trump cameo, is the fact that even though I obviously and have been through it loads and loads, when you showed me this first sequence, I really got a moment of excitement. I was like, they're going to come out, they're going to win, even though logically I know that's not possible because I know what happens, but it's so well done. Particularly I think Jip really goes back into that moment. You almost see it in his eyes that he's reliving that moment of hope they had in the middle of the strike, that they're going to win. He can taste it almost. So.
Well, that's it, because I suppose it was another thing we set out to do, wasn't it? That to make the film that even if you know what happens at the end, to forget that you know what happens with the strike, and it's not just for a film to be able to follow the story, but as I say, that history is a living thing, and to that as events happen, you can only look back at history with hindsight and always feel that everything inevitably went one particular way. But actually, when events are unfolding, it is like that. There are these moments that until they happen, you don't know what the outcome is, and it's something you want to get across.
I think this is the bit more colourful language during this section as well.
Well, we cut it all out. But yeah, I think it's a real, it's a thing about what all of the miners wanted to get across, and why they talked in this way, and as Paul is talking about, that they want to get across that, things may have seemed like it was all headed towards one conclusion, but actually they didn't know what was going to happen the next day. Things could change constantly throughout the strike.
Yeah. And then obviously this is disappointing for everybody.
Well, this was there was still a fight to be had, but I think a lot of them felt that this was the moment.
And also I think you can't be too... It's very easy again in hindsight to judge each of the individual actions as well of the people involved. They definitely should have stayed out, but they didn't necessarily know that at the time that was going to be, you know, the death blow to the
single
strike.
moment, and
you know, because they didn't even know that opportunity was going to arise. You know, it could have been the Dockers that was, you know, the kind of final dispute.
well, and there was still months to go with the strike as well. But yeah, it was certainly. But again, you know, it's hindsight. It's certainly look back as this one of the key, you know, absolute key turning points.
Yeah.
Chip looking a bit surfer duty occasionally this bit.
After failure, another strike to materialise.
Again, you see, it's funny. Also in the photos, you see the same faces pop up in film and things all the time. You see them a lot.
I like these ones as well. Just sort of the day-to-day of being on the picket lines of being a miner.
Sorry, interestingly, that last photo was the only colour photo that we used. We obviously made it black and white to be to keep consistent with all the other photos.
There's your man with the badges as well. We do love.
I do love
Johnny
the
Woods.
Johnny Woods.
Yeah, he's in a lot, isn't he?
Yeah, he's in lots of. Yeah, he's in loads of archive.
I mean, there are a lot of moustaches as well.
It was certainly a time for moustaches.
It was moustache heavy in the 80s, wasn't it?
But it's funny though how music does it, because it's almost like you could show the same photos and you change the soundtrack and you give it a slightly different feel, and then suddenly you really get across that feeling of, from instead of being very hopeful to be kind of, you know, things going down.
Well, it was also, you know, at this point it was about the sense of, you know, that they're not defeated, but the sense of isolation, you know, around them. Again, you know, Paul's talking here about the union assets being sequestered and things, which was an incredible thing at the time. But it was interesting that Mike Jackson, the gay supporter, was talking about how that's actually also one of the things that meant lesbian and gay supporters went down personally to take the money to the miners, because if the government hadn't seized their assets, then all the solidarity had been donated through the official union structures, but by this government seizing it, that's what led to all these incredible stories about ordinary people coming into contact with each other. So it's quite a sort of unintended consequence, really.
Almost like a dual thing. Like it was, you know, incredibly difficult for the miners, but it led to all that great stuff.
They always tried to overcome.
This is some of the hardest archive, I think, to watch, when the guys are talking about guys who had gone back to work, and you know, and the fact that I think that he says it perfectly. They're not They're fighting the state, and you feel the wear and tear on people. You know, they're not giving up, but they're starting to feel.
Well, you can see it's what I was talking about before, about how you see the change in people in archive, and you can see it on their faces. You know that's people who've been out in strike for a long time. Yeah, it's very difficult, but yeah, I think all the way through, you know, this is something, even back to the roadblocks at Nottingham, the union assets being sequestered. At each point, something really big is thrown at them, whether it's police or, you know, seizing assets or whatever, and they always find a way around it. If it wasn't pretending to be a jogger, it was this amazing solidarity. You know,
and this particularly is when the women really, you know, a lot of the guys who, like I think as I mentioned earlier, you know, they literally couldn't pick it anymore because they'd just be arrested again, and it sort of, again, was a negative thing, but really pushed women to the forefront and made them, in some ways, have a more joint experience with the guys. They got to see the kind of police violence firsthand, which is obviously a terrible thing, but also does teach you some lessons about the world that maybe you can't get unless you're there.
Yeah.
I think what really comes across in this footage as well, particularly from Joyce as well, is that it was, you know, it wasn't this abstract big struggle. It was a personal struggle. They felt like they were really fighting for their lives, for their livelihoods, and they were fighting against a whole different idea. You know, like
also it's the fact that, you know, it again seems obvious, and we see the footage and know that, you know, the confrontations between miners and police. But for a lot of people, they were not expecting, you know, these are ordinary people. Imagine just you or I, you know, suddenly having to confront the police and be taking on a whole government. You know, it's like, yes, there'd been strikes in the 70s and things, but for a lot of people, they had not experienced anything like this. And I think it was we take it for granted now when you look at that footage. Of course, it's the miners versus police or whatever, but actually it was as shocking to them or more, because they were at the real end of it, you know.
And this stuff, I mean, this is also from negatives that, you know, because there weren't mainstream media in the villages when talking about the siege of villages. The mainstream media weren't there in the middle of the night when the police turned up and started knocking on people's doors. I think that's one of the things that actually Billy Elliot comes across really well when you see the police running through people's...
Well, this was, again, another... We talked before about how obviously what we wanted to do was to give an expression to their story, and so we had, we've got Paul, as you said earlier, walking around and describing the whole siege of his village, but how villages across Yorkshire and were occupied by riot police, but we, it's in the end we've got so much amazing material. We just wanted to do it visually, but it's really, I think for me, more than anything else in the entire strike, and of what we saw, this was the most shocking to me, because to see ordinary villages, you just walked out and we were going to them, we would go around filming, and it'd just be an ordinary everyday village, and actually to see it sort of become like a war zone,
Yeah, and I think one of the things we didn't include is, that Howard says, is that it's not just that they would turn up, but the police would do things like go to the village, cut the phone lines, and you're in the middle of rural Yorkshire, so it's not, there's no mobile phones, and then go completely mental, smashing people, beating people up, and you couldn't even call anyone. It's not even like you could call a major city or a news desk to say the police are going crazy. You were just trapped in the village with essentially a police riot going on, and you couldn't tell anyone about it, and you couldn't get out.
I mean, these photos are just, it shows you that stark contrast, doesn't it? Because that's just a village, just ordinary people walking along, and there are police everywhere. But it was important, I think, as well. Obviously, this is horrifying, really. But this photo, for instance, where the miners are fighting back. The film was not about presenting, as people as simply passive victims and as the police brutality and the people at the end of it, but about that these are active people, and people did fight back. There was heavy confrontations between both sides. Yeah. But it's about people. They were trying to defend their, and as they saw it, defend their villages.
Defending your community. It's not about something abstract. It's happening right on your doorstep, and you've got to fight for it.
Yeah. This was some of this footage was from a BBC documentary that's done in the winter that featured a lot of people who you see in the early spring, looking very, very different.
We're getting tougher at this time of year. Getting near.
Yeah, because obviously what we show in this section is very much about the hardship and about winter. Now, the one thing that we weren't able to include in the film, just given the time, is Christmas, because actually this was a period where they had, a huge amount of solidarity at the same time. But that said, when you've been on strike for a year, no amount of solidarity and money is able to keep you going. People have bills to pay, but.
I think Jip sums it up really well when he says, imagine what it was like, take your salary, put it in a drawer and don't touch it for a year. And I think that just starkly brings home what it actually meant. They were on strike, they literally weren't getting anything, but what is amazing, they did carry on. I think this stuff really though shows at this point in the strike, things have got really, really tough. When you see people chopping down trees essentially to heat their houses.
Firewood. I mean, the song is turning the clock back, and you look at that footage and it does feel sort of almost 1930s. It doesn't feel like 1984 that this stuff is happening. Yeah, this is hard. It's hard. I think Ron. It was quite an emotional interview throughout, really. I mean, he was, it's a lot of this stuff is still really, really raw for them.
It's not in the film, but he obviously said in the interviews, you're looking at a very bitter man. It was tough. And
it's very tough,
especially for some. Ron caps as well, because he still lives in where he grew up. He has a lot of.
He's seen the community change.
He's seen it all change around him. I know a lot of the guys, obviously, that we interview. It had obviously still affects them, but a lot of them have done different things since the strike, and gone to different places. But Ron's very much, he's seen what's happened around his community and what happened around. But he still works for the NUM, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. Yeah, no, it's tough, because I think that's the moment they were still fighting at this stage. Apart from anything, because so many miners had been sacked, and it was also about fighting to make sure that if the strike ended, they were reinstated. But I think for me the most powerful moment is I think it's coming up soon, where Joyce says, how could we stop fighting, essentially. And I think it was also that, for me, a really powerful sense of when you know that everything is on the line, and if the strike is defeated, then you lose everything. How can you not fight, even if you know that there's not other forces coming to the rescue, if you like? And it's that impossible choice that people were put through.
And it's also, I think what they start to talk about here is, the art. It was like a myth that started to spread, that they were losing, even though, and once that idea started to take place, combined with the real despair, like the stuff on the news of the buses going back, I think, people would see people starting to go back to work, not in different areas of the country, but in their own country, but it would normally be like one miner or something. And even myself, when I was first sort of started doing the research, I was like, oh yeah, by that time loads and loads of miners were going back to work towards the end of the year. Yeah, the majority of miners were back at work, and that's why the strike ended. Whereas actually the majority of miners were still out on strike. It was only a very, very, and the numbers are incredible, very, very small number of miners.
The thing that I found amazing actually is, obviously you're watching news from the beginning of the strike through to the end, you know, every detail, and that is, yeah.
That is the best hair in the film.
You know, details all the way through. And actually, news reports from, I think, March 84, when the strike begins, are going, the strike is over, the strike's crumbling, and people are going back to work. And McGregor is interviewed for months and months on end, where every single interview, he says, most miners have gone back to work and the strike is over. And they just kept doing it, and then it went on, and it went on, and it went on. And I think both sides had no idea that it was going to go on for a year, and, you know, no idea at all. This would be over in weeks, maybe months, you know.
Well, it's that story we couldn't include about, you know, people sneaking onto buses to see how many miners
To
were
count
on.
how many miners, yeah.
There's not many. And this is all from the old newspapers from the time. And
which again, they talked about in interviews. You know, the fact that the coal board was actually putting out adverts saying go back to work and this many miners. And you think, okay, you know, that's what you remember, but it's, you know, how prevalent is it? And then you start to find them. You know,
to ask questions about, they were targeting individuals. You know, about people who were in debt, and so you sort of start to wonder, how does the coal board know how much money an individual miner owes to the electricity board? How do they know what gambling debts they have? How do they know their weaknesses? And it starts to infer more questions about how the strike was fought on the side of the state.
Well, there's certainly, in terms of, obviously, Seamus Milne's book, The Enemy Within, talks about it, but there's certainly a whole wider area about, you know, the levels of state involvement and intelligence gathering, and you know, a lot of miners talk about phone hacking and all of those sorts of things that we obviously we could never. It wasn't the film we were trying to make, but there's a whole area, you know, world of stuff to explore about that. Yeah, here we go. You know, this is, you know, it was, you know, we had to, you know, take our pick basically of how many news reports there were about miners going back to work.
And it's great bit of sound design when all the things building up and all that. Because it's just,
well, it's just important to show, you know, because that's, again, to just convey what it felt like. That it must be, you know, imagine that you're on strike and every single news report every day is telling you that you've lost, you know,
it's just hammering
and what that must feel like.
Yeah, everyone gets very animated.
Well, and it was also, I think Jim says it later on, as they were saying that pits were open and working that had been closed.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the age of like a sort of the internet, but it's not like people could look online, you know, these are, again, rural places. People hadn't left, you know, we're saying they started to explore the world during the Solidarity, but, you know, how's a miner in Kent supposed to know what's actually going on with a pit in Yorkshire? You know,
I suppose, you know, in the end, it's almost irrelevant because it's the volume of stuff. You know, does it matter that one is true and one is not when every news report endlessly is also, you know, I think it becomes that sort of sea of you know, of reports that turns it, but in combination with the fact that, you know, it was beginning to go down. They were saying it from day one, but it was that in combination with being isolated and
and people did break. I mean, it's not like some people didn't go back.
No, of course, yeah. You know, and in the end, if they didn't have union solidarity, they knew from the beginning if they weren't going to get, you know, certainly get Nottingham out, let alone another union out, then, you know, they wouldn't be able to win, and it was those things.
Show a dramatic rise in the number of NUM members at work.
The NCB points to men returning to work in all 12 areas.
All these graphics are just showing, it's quite stark, aren't they? Just seeing the amount of numbers that they're saying that people are going back, and, you know, it's not necessarily true, and all that stuff. Just find all that in the archive and seeing it all.
Well, I think it's also, they show the numbers out of context. So like 200 miners sounds like a lot of miners going back. Not if there's like 2,000 who are still on strike, but it just showing the numbers on their own is sort of seems to have been the tactic of the press, is to sort of take things totally out of context.
Well, it's not so much the press as it was the end. You know, the end. They would take the NCB figures basically, and I just remember seeing an interview. This was, I think, for the 25th anniversary, an interview with a Tory politician who said they were pumping out so much propaganda. The government didn't even know at what point they'd actually won. You know, it's at what point, you know, is it real? Like, how has the tide actually turned? You know, but yeah, so the NCB every day would report this many numbers, and that would just be taken at face value, you know.
Yeah, Steve sums it up brilliantly.
Yeah.
His face is very emotive.
Well, this is it. I mean, it's just, I think it's the sheer frustration, you know,
Yeah.
because they want people like Steve were arguing the whole time to stay out. You know, it wasn't that they would succumb, but obviously all around you could understand as people were sort of beginning to waver.
I think it's also interesting to think like how much effort the NCB had to make to actually break the strike is also interesting. The idea that people naturally sort of, it would have just crumbled anyway. Well, no, there was a very like concerted campaign, and it took a lot. It took months and months and months and months and months of that, which I think re-emphasises the kind of determination. And this, I think this guy really sums up well what it was like for when they did see their friends and colleagues go back, and what that actually meant, you know, to the communities.
You know, and just for the film as well, I think, you know, one of the key problems that documentaries in the past have seen about the strike, they always don't quite know how to end, because, you know, apart from anything, it was a messy end to the miners' strike. There was not one key battle that meant it was over, and you just see some incredible stuff. You know, there's big documentaries that go, oh, what happened was Band-Aid came along in 1984, and so there was a new kind of politics, and just people forgot about the strike, and almost look at it from a public opinion point of view, and not the reality of what, you know, it's people out on strike, and public opinion was against them a lot of the time, you know, but it was about what was actually going on in terms of the strike, and so it's important for us to, I think, try and get across what the real end was about, you know.
And keep going, you know, keep the film going, keep talking about right until the very end of the strike, because like you say, films that end, boom. You know,
yeah.
I think this was sort of...
Well, again,
a lot of debate went into like how we were going to use this, and kind of the best way to do it without being mawkish, without just sort of...
Or just being more news archive, really. We wanted to get across... Because obviously this is, again, from the beginning, to St. Colliery is the beginning of the film, Penalta, and to have it both as, you know, the actual showing what's happened today, you know, it's a speech over a colliery that's now closed, and also be symbolic of the sense of as if the speech is echoing out across the whole country to every colliery, and what that sort of sense of desolation that I think people felt.
And across time as well. I know that sounds quite pretentious, but it echoes, you know, it's something that has had an impact.
And can in some ways sound like a warning from history.
Yeah. And then we're obviously coming up on our shot from the mine shaft, which sort of came by accident but ended up working really well in the film, that we were looking for how to get into these next set of interviews that were against Black and how that was going to work. And I phoned you, I think, when I was looking at a location, I'm in a mine shaft, how would that work for anything? And you were like, actually, I'm just thinking about this thing right now.
Yeah, and the sense of, you know, because obviously with the miners on strike, it's a sense of showing an empty mine shaft that's left, and at the same time the sense that, you know, to capture the emotion of what it's like.
There's a lot of fun filming.
I think it's also because, you know, like we said, we've carried out a lot of interviews very early on, and we really wanted to get that raw emotion that comes with the first time people talk about something, which it was a massively traumatic event for them, and I think Joe's bit sums it up really well. It's not necessarily something that we got once. I don't think it's necessarily we could have got repeated, because it would, the reason he felt like that is because it was one of the first times he'd ever spoken about what it was like to actually go to hear the news that the strike was over.
But also to make these interviews separate from any other interview in the film, where it's just stark black, there's no sense of vibrancy from archive, there's no colour, they're just against a black plain background. I think it's, you know, it's about actually having just a stark moment that everything else is gone, you know, it's like this whole strike has fallen silent at this point.
Joyce gets me every time on this bit. Because you just get that feeling about what it was like at the end.
It's so emotional. When we interviewed Joe, actually the first time, his partner was in the room, and we had to stop because she started crying as well, because she was a child during the strike.
I remember having to be very careful in every interview. You know, it's like at a certain point, you ask the question, what does it feel like to lose the strike? Because I think every miner and every supporter, every woman who we interviewed cried at that point.
We haven't done a single interview where people didn't cry when they talk about the end of the strike, which...
And it's still, you know, and it catches them off guard, because I think in some ways it's memories that they've buried, you know, that feeling of what it was like at the end. So yeah, it's quite a hard thing to go through, but I think, you know, important, you know, definitely. Because it's...
I think it's important, you know, when particularly after Thatcher died, people had a lot of discussions about sort of the abstract things that she'd done, and it's not necessarily connected to the personal experience, and so it's very important to remind people that this was a very personal tragedy.
It's a real life.
It had a massive effect on their daily lives. And
well, it's why I think it's important here that rather, you know, we're not talking about sort of economics of mining or the strike even, but it's Norman talking about his how his marriage fell apart, you know, and what the personal impact was on his life, because as you say, they were real lives, you know, these are real people, you know, who are both at the centre of things as things are going up, and then, you know, what it was like when they were defeated. And
we also, I think it was important that we decided to put this stuff at the end, the sad stuff really at the end, because different emotional points came out in the interviews when we spoke to people at different times, not necessarily chronologically, but I think we wanted people to get to know our characters, to understand that they were humorous, that they were strong, before we showed what it meant. Because if you start with this kind of emotional, sad stuff really, or the loss of if you start off with the strike being lost at the beginning, where have you got to go?
Yeah,
really?
well, that's it. It's the whole point is we weren't looking back at this with hindsight. We were trying to convey what it's like to go through an event like this and what it's like to fight and then lose. You know, I think it was important to do the film chronologically, really. You know, to get, because as Norman described it, it's a roller coaster. You know, it had its ups and downs, and you know, I think we want people to experience that. And then, I mean, this is just. I still watch this. It was important, I think, that we contain this in the film as a long news report, because I wanted to get really across what is it like when you're sitting at home and you're actually watching this. You know, it's not edited. You know, it's not. There's no music. There's no nothing. It's because to imagine this being the headline of a day, and there's an entire industry that's essentially wiped out. You know,
and just keeping all these numbers coming up. You know, like, you know, could have been temptation to cut it away, but just to keep going with it, because it brings across that stark reality of what happened and how this was the end of the industry in the 90s.
And how what they were saying during the strike was proved categorical. All the talks about a vibrant coal industry and everything, and the strike needs to be defeated because we want a vibrant coal industry, and you look, the strike's defeated, and that's what happens.
Yeah, they sum it up well in these bits of archive.
I think also what's interesting as well is this guy from Nottingham, because you do wonder about the Notts miners who didn't go on strike. What answer did they have for when the entire industry was destroyed?
Including a lot of Nottingham mines,
yeah.
Yeah, it's quite stark. Brings it all home, having him.
Yeah. In fact, he refers to his own union, which actually is the UDM, a separate union by that point. You know, that had broken during the strike.
Yeah, all sums up really nicely towards the end.
Yeah, it was a horrible sequence to edit. Really, it's not. You know, when you're editing different stuff throughout the thing, it's going to be a joy to be sort of sharing in the moments of what happened in the strike, but actually to sort of come to the stark reality.
And I think it's also, because no matter how many times you watch it, it's still very powerful. You know, it's still maybe more so because we know the characters. But I think for anyone watching it, particularly this bit at the end, it gets people at different times.
Well, this was you, Mark, wasn't it? With
me and Malcolm and the DP man went out and just went around a lot of desolate bits around. It's mainly.
I mean, these are all the real.
Yeah, but it's all real places. And just sort of looking at what was still there, and some beautiful images. Obviously, not loads of fun to shoot, but interesting to go and have a look and see. I mean, these lots are all colliery areas.
Because these are, when we were visiting these places, throughout the making of the film, the point is so much. You don't see them on the news. You don't see them. There's no reason a lot of the time for people to go to these places, and so they're hidden all across the country. Is communities and villages that have been left like this, really.
Yeah. No, it was stark going and looking.
It's quite eye-opening. I mean, we were at one village and there was like a motorcycle robbery happened while they were there, and we also, speaking to kids, and it's like they're living in this village and it's a desolate place, and they didn't even know a mine was there.
Yeah, exactly.
You'd be speaking to them and they had no idea that mining was there because it's been buried.
And there are whole towns which basically sprung up just for mining.
Yeah.
The only thing that ever happened there for 200 years was mining. There was no other secondary industry, and then they don't. And so young people growing up now who can't find work and stuff don't really understand the point of their town or of them in some
why
ways.
It has ended up like that.
I remember one place struck me. I can't remember where it was. Somewhere in Yorkshire, maybe skipped it in. There was the biggest shop in this shopping centre was a mobility scooter shop, And
Really?
it was like that kind of like, what is there for young people? Right? If that's the big, like, that's obviously people have just left that community because there's nothing left there anymore. And it's, you know, it was quite sad to see, but obviously emphasising what the miners said, and, you know, proves that they were right.
And it's what, you know, it was a fight for their survival in so many ways. You know, they knew that that's what was going to happen to their communities. It's why why the strike went on so long and why they fought so hard.
Yeah.
I think it's quite kind of interesting that even though the community was scattered, in some ways that community still exists in different, the mining community has gone, but those activists who sort of drove that strike are still very much involved. And I think that's part of why also our guys are so eloquent, because they took that fire that they had with them from the strike into different areas of their lives. So.
Yeah, I mean, some of them, you know, still live in areas, and others have sort of moved. I mean, I think there's a difference in some ways between the miners we feature in the film and a lot of miners, actually, is because I was so active on the front line throughout the year, they were able to take that and sort of educated themselves throughout the strike. But there was a lot of miners who didn't do that and sort of also, you know, stayed in their communities.
I think there was one really shocking thing is when me and Mark were in, I won't name the town, but we met a ex-miner who is really beautiful kind of rural place, and we met an ex-miner who's clearly a heroin addict.
And drugs became a really big thing.
And it was the first time I'd ever sort of met someone who really, really was like a casualty of that kind of thing, like lived in a nice house, had clearly had a respectable job, and had just turned to drugs. And it was very, very hard, very, very hard.
I think the thing about this as well is it's funny because in some ways, again, this is, I suppose you could say, the most political montage of the film, if you like. It's sort of exploring the legacy, but again, everything that's in this montage is actually what the miners thought was the legacy of the strike. And again, just rather than including in interviews, we decided to do it
I think
visually.
it's really important for us to bring it to now and
to bring
it through to the present day, because just to really emphasise to people how important it was and what happened in the strike, how it has led to where we are today.
And particularly I think with the energy stuff, because that is something that we wanted to explore in the film, is that it wasn't just about jobs, it was about a secure energy policy. And I think when you look at the kind of video clips from the 90s about the biggest concern about privatisation is how you're going to control energy costs, and then you go to now, you can't control energy costs.
Well, it got actually quite repetitive watching news clip after news clip of them saying it's going to be privatised, but it's going to lead to a vibrant industry, whether it's coal or rail or energy or whatever. And every time people are saying it's going to lead to rocketing energy prices, or it's going to lead to steel industry being closed, or it's going to lead to rocketing train prices and
accidents.
Yeah, every time. It's just this endless circle, and each time that's what transpired. Now this was actually based on it was Paul in particular was passionate about not obviously laying a financial crash at directly at the door of the defeat of the miners, but about saying that was the sort of, in a way, the Thatcherite economic model that was ushered in to replace traditional industries in Britain was finance. And actually the idea that it was simply a good thing for, yes, the miners should have been defeated, it shouldn't have been defeated, it was sad, but ultimately it was good for the economy. Actually, this is, from some of the miners' point of view, this is the sort of, the real results of what that economic model was about.
Yeah. Some great footage of strike, people marching.
Well, I think this is what I meant when I said they took the fight. Lots of people who have been sort of separate in the different things for many years are now finding new causes that they can rally around. I know Joyce, for example, is very involved in the Care UK strike.
They're all doing sorts of about education, about health. I mean, I think it's about all of the miners were really keen here they were really keen on the idea that they're still fighting and people are still fighting, and they didn't want it to simply be something about the defeat, but they wanted to use it as both like a lesson from history, but also an inspiration that you can do something.
That was interesting.
There's Mike,
trying to control those miners on a massive 50,000 people march. Always fun. It's
important to say as well. Obviously, we knew our miners were there. We didn't know Mike Jackson was going to be there. We didn't know Joyce was going to be there. So these are, they really are there because they believe in what they're doing.
Exactly. And obviously we come back at the end.
Yeah, well, I think it was important with this to not just end almost like, I don't know, triumphalist. No, it's simply okay. People are fighting back, but to actually bring it back to it's those two things. There is still a human cost. It's not all okay because they're fighting today, but at the same time, as Paul says at the end, the future's up for grabs. It's like they were defeated. It's important that they were defeated, but that doesn't mean history's over.
Yeah, exactly. That there's still a fight to be had. People need to remember that.
Yeah, it's the two legacies, isn't it? It's that the legacy, the defeat and what that meant, but also, and what it's meant to this community, for instance, but also the other legacy, which is that people are still fighting back, and it's those two things sort of hand in hand.
Yeah. Good old Paul.
Yeah. It's still quite tough, I think, to see him walking around his community when
especially just remembering when he first walked up and he hadn't seen it before, and he was just like, oof.
Yeah, but it's the fact that he does, it's this final moment actually coming up here, where he walks away is really, and it was something he was particularly keen on, is really the idea of that the miners that have walked into history, and it's their fight's over, but it's handing it over, sort of a new generation.
Yeah, we thought it was important to get these extra bits at the end just to bring it a bit more up to date.
Well, really, it was about, obviously to show that they planned to close 75 pits, it's a staggering number. It's more than Arthur Scargill had even argued at the time, because he thought it was about 50 they were going to close. To get across actually, obviously about David Jones and the fact that a number of people died during the strike, which is, I think, important to mention, and that this is about saying, because obviously we didn't want to go into all the economics of coal and everything like that, but just to say that it wasn't really about coal.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us, and that is the DVD commentary of Still the Enemy Within.
Yeah, hope you enjoyed our lovely banter.
Goodbye.
Like the other children do. You can scuff your shoes, you can tear your hands, and they'll rip that shirt off you. Tommy, since you moved away, they've taken our town and they made it new. Now there stands a chemical plant where the cherry orchards grew. And I married Lucy from the back of our class, who once wrote letters to you. We've got kids and we send them to school from the street with a pretty view. Shirt of blue. Oh, in your shirt of blue. Maybe Tommy, we grew up too quick from the field where the flowers stroll. From a butterfly stick to a baton and a brick, changing uniforms far too soon. Hey now, Tommy, shall we meet again in the morning wet with you? Me at the gates of the colliery, you in your shirt of blue. Shall we wrestle in the muddy patch like the other poor men do? We can scuff our boots, we can tear our hands on our